Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. We will be reviewing the budget philosophy and parameters that were used to generate the 17-18 budget, understanding the general fund revenue and expenditure budget, and the compensation plans that were built by TASB, which is the Texas Association of School Board, and it's their HR Services Department. Is that what it's called? HR Services Department? Okay. The budgetary process does begin with sound planning, and we do start planning for budget at the January board meeting. What our budget philosophy includes is that we will strive to maintain financial stability in all programs and operations of the district, and that we will seek to maintain competitive compensation levels for all classes of employees and consider such recommendations as long as they are sustainable. This will be our third year that we have been, or that our district has contracted with TASB to have salary studies. Oh, can y'all? Yeah, I didn't even see if y'all could see the screen. I'm so sorry. Now, as a district, we have many funding sources, but the main operating fund for the school district is the general fund. So I'm going to touch briefly on the general fund. And the general funds portion of our tax rate is $1.04. So when you look at your property tax summaries, you'll see tax billings from city, from the county, from the hospital. I think one says farm to land. And you'll see one from the school district. $1.04 of it is for the general fund. Now, when we collect our revenues for the 17-18 school year, we estimated $84,348,000. Most of our district's revenues, or for our school district, comes from state funding. And this last legislative session, there was not additional funding approved for school districts. So we received this just a slight increase, but not a portion that would, create the change that we sometimes are looking for. So for all school districts, they remained the same formula from the state on funding, but 76% of our revenue does come from the state. Earlier when I mentioned the tax rate, oh, y'all can't see my mouse. Let me fix that, sorry. That's what I was trying to make sure. Okay, earlier when I mentioned the tax rate, this is the revenue that we generate from tax collections, local tax collections, and other local collections like the interest from the money we have at the bank, athletic activities. So from local revenue, that's 22% of our revenue collection. And then 1.9% comes from federal sources like SHARS. SHARS is the School Health and Related Services. So again, our budget or our revenue is at $84 million. The majority does come from the state, but there was not any new funding from the state for this school year. Now, what I like to do is show you our expenditure budget. 78.5% of our budget is to support instruction and student support. That we are a school district, again, so our focus is on our students and their instructional support. 3.8% is for administration. 17.7% falls into operations. So again, when we look at the budget, we break it out between what our purpose is, our functional areas. So again, it's instructional and student support, general administration, and operations. But what we also do is we break out the budget by type of expense. So the $84 million budget, 82% of it is tied to payroll. So again, a lot of our budget is tied to payroll. The next large category is professional and contracted services, and you can see that the largest expense here is utilities. So the state of Texas requires that we code our utilities under professional and contracted services. That's why that may be a little misleading, but and it's 7.3%, but the majority of it is in our utilities. And followed by that is supplies. So $5 million of our budget, or 6%. And then miscellaneous is 3.6%. And the majority of the miscellaneous you can see is on extracurricular activities. So again, I really want everybody to understand where the budget is focused on. Again, 78.5% of it is for instruction and student support, but 82.3% of our general fund budget goes to payroll. So again, when we look at funding for the school district, these are the areas that have the largest portion of the budget. Now, one thing that I do want to share with y'all is over the past couple of years, at the end of the year, our district would have favorability. And the favorability was, in my opinion, too large, which meant that we were over budgeting in areas that we were not using the funds in. So since 13-14 to 17-18, any identification that we have had of unused resources, which is budget, we have reallocated. So as a school district, our revenue has only increased by $5.8 million, but our budget has been reallocated by $13 million. Again, we took budget that was coded to different categories, but when they would not use that budget, I would reevaluate it each year and reduce the unused budget, because again, when a district plans on their budget, you want to plan it as efficient and effective as you can. And so that has been our goal over the last 4 years, is continuously evaluating our budget to make sure that we're using the funds that we receive from the state that year and that we're using them that year. So we have revamped our budget, as I mentioned to you, by $13 million, and $10 million of it, or 82%, has gone to payroll. And I don't know if y'all recall, but like I said, over the last 3 years, we have been working with TASB. So the first changes that we made to payroll was increasing the teacher starting pay and for hourly employees. And then the following year, we increased the teacher pay and kept working on hourly employees. And then January of 2016, we implemented all of what TASB recommended for hourly and paraprofessional employees. And for 17-18, we finally implemented everything from TASB. So as of 17-18, our compensation plans are competitive to the market. Again, we phased it in the areas that needed to be addressed first, which what TASB identified was with our hourly waged employees. So again, like I mentioned, as we evaluate the use of our budget, we continue to evaluate it to focus it on the areas that we need it. And our budget has been refocused by 82% to payroll. Now for compensation and benefits, the reason I gave you that history was so that it could give you the background as to where the longevity stipend came from. The compensation policy is DEA local, so it's compensation and benefits, wage, and hour laws. The superintendent shall recommend to the board for approval compensation plans for all district employees. Compensation plans may include wage and salary structure, stipends, benefits, and incentives. The compensation plans include your teacher and professional staff, administrative staff, paraprofessional staff, auxiliary staff, stipends, and substitute and extra duty pay. Salary increases are not guaranteed automatically for each year. Therefore, neither past nor future salaries can be calculated, assumed, or predicted based on salary schedules. So again, over the last 3 years, we've been working with TASB, and this year at the September board meeting, we have a recommendation for them to approve for TASB to continue to maintain or review our compensation plan so that we stay competitive. Now, when TASB's goal, or the goal for a salary study, I shouldn't say TASB's goals, but the goal for a salary study is to evaluate competitive market prices, and what they mean is competitive jobs and their salary ranges, build and align pay structures with the competitive job market, which means if at every other district, if your custodians are titled hourly or auxiliary, then we should have them there. If at every other district your secretaries are in paraprofessionals, that's where we should have them. So again, this means aligning our job titles to where the market has them. And then review and recommend administrative guidelines for managing pay systems. And as I mentioned, we do have a request for the board to approve a contract with TASB again this year in order for them to keep maintaining and doing these salary studies. Again, this is a third party, and their experience, and they do have data from all the school districts that participate with them. So they do have the data to be able to provide us with the most competitive information that we can have. Now, this is a sample of what our salary ranges used to look like. So for example, for a pay grade 2, it used to range from $175 to $500. That means somebody in a pay grade 2 would be making the same as somebody starting off in pay grade 8, or the midpoint of pay grade 8. So our pay grades used to overlap to the point where it wasn't allowing employees, or not allowing, but it wasn't influencing employees to seek higher level positions. So that's what TASB said, that our pay ranges were extremely wide, and they had excessive pay overlaps. There was little incentives for employees to seek promotion, and they lacked fair pay. Now, the reason they lacked fair pay was because our starting pay was so low. Once TASB identified that our starting pay was so low, that's when the initiatives began, where we started with the ones who had it the lowest, which was hourly or auxiliary. And then, as I mentioned, in January of 2016, it went to paraprofessionals. But throughout all of those years, it's also been our teachers as well. Now, the longevity stipend, this is the second year, or this will be the second year. There are 83 employees. Last year there was 87 that are part of the longevity stipend. And the way the longevity stipend is calculated is it takes, oh, that's not linked. I'll open up this file right now. But it takes the teacher's value of their last step increase and creates a percentage of what every other teacher will receive as a step increase. So some teachers already exceed the max. And what we do is we want to make sure that they maintain the value of their step increase at their max step. And that for this year is $300. So $300 against their max salary on their pay scale is 0.47%. So other employees shouldn't make a higher percentage that once they exceed the market range than teachers. And that was the intent, to make sure that we were fair. Other districts do not have longevity pay. They just max you out, you're capped, and that's it. So again, the board did want us to find a solution, and we felt that it was fair, or we felt that the fairest way to calculate it is based on the teacher's max. Because again, that's where we have the majority of our employees, and that is what we do. We're a teaching and learning environment. I'm going to open up this file now, so let me hit exit and get the file open so that you could see it. And let me minimize it. Okay, I'll make this one size bigger. These are the districts that TASB compares us to. So for example, we're compared to Eagle Pass, Edgewood ISD, Harlandale, Laredo, San Angelo, South San Antonio, and United ISD. We did include Uvalde ISD, but as you can see over here, they are not part of the competitive schedule, but we made sure we included so that we knew what salary ranges they were at for teachers. So again, these are the districts that TASB has identified as our market. Yes, ma'am? No, sure, no, definitely. Let me make it a little bit bigger. There you go. And again, just remember that Uvalde is listed here, but we were only monitoring their starting pay. It is not part of the comparison. So that's why there's no excess over here on this column. Hourly falls under non-exempt here. So this is what so these are the districts that they used. And for teachers and exempt staff is over here. For teachers and professionals, and for non-exempt, and for paraprofessionals and auxiliaries over here. Yes. But, but yes, these are the districts that they use. Now, there is one example of a position that our district has that hardly any of the other districts have, which is security officers. So for security officers, they went out and looked at the, I guess they would call it the regular market, which is like the business market. But that's probably the only example that we have where they went out to the actual market to look at that. So TASB breaks it down by pay grade. I'm sorry, by job classification chart. So I will make it a little bit bigger, but as you can see here, what TASB does is every year that they work on our salary study, they look at our job titles, they look at the job titles of where other districts have them, they look at their market ranges, and they create the market range, which is this right here. And then if positions should be moved into different job classifications, they recommend that as well. So for example, previously we had the coordinator multimedia production in pay grade 3. The market is bringing it down to a pay grade 2. And it's not that it's a demotion, it's the market has it in this pay range. So pay grades are just alignments to ranges. That's what they are. So if, like we mentioned, this coordinator multimedia production, the market that they compared us to has that position within this pay range. So that's where they recommended to place that one with these other job titles that have a similar pay range according to TASB. So again, we had, when you look at this, anything that's highlighted is a change. So for example, coordinator finance didn't change, that's where it was last year when we did the study. But human resources change, it came over from paraprofessional. Like as I mentioned, coordinator multimedia was brought down to this pay range. And then this position used to be on the teacher scale. Well, it's not a teacher-related position, so again, they moved it. So again, they look at all of our job titles, they look at our job descriptions, and they look at the market, and they align it to the market. So you can see here on pay grade 3 where behavior specialists also came over to this pay scale and aren't on the teacher scale. Librarians are no longer on a librarian scale. The athletic trainer moved, and again, that's just what the market has for that position. It increased from this range up here to this range down here. So they recommended to place it in this job grade or pay grade. Counselors, again, they used to be, we used to have them on their own salary table, and the market has them within this range. So TASB recommended that we bring them all together. So again, all of this is based on job titles, the market, and TASB identifying the value of the market for that job title to create the ranges. Now these are all administrative. Paraprofessional, you'll see very few changes because on paraprofessional and auxiliary, the majority of the changes happened on January of 2016 when we did the mid-year pay increase. So a lot of the changes happened at that time, but the administrative professional group, which is this one that you just saw, we hadn't touched this one. As I said, we phased in several areas we phased in the priorities that TASB was identifying, which started with auxiliary and then paraprofessional and now professional. So you see a lot of changes here because we hadn't touched that in the last 3 years. But on the paraprofessionals, there aren't that many, there hardly are any changes, but again, this was set back in January of 2016. So based on the market, there wasn't a change in the market to these job titles within this pay range. And I'll find where the first change is. Right here. So right here, TASB recommended the district police, the secretary for district police be placed within this pay range. So again, they go out to the market, they compare the job titles, and they identify the ranges that they should be placed in. And then they recommended changes for bookkeeper at high school and the secretary for 9th grade, Del Rio Middle School, and high school. So again, this is where the market has them. And so those were the changes that were recommended. On the auxiliary, let me see if there's any changes. Okay, mechanic helper. In the market, it used to be grouped with these types of positions and their ranges, but again, they moved it to this range right here, which is what we have identified as pay grade 3. And then I think there might be one more change. Okay, so peace officers and police sergeants, like I mentioned, they go out to, a lot of school districts do not have them, so they do go out to the business, and I say business, but the business side, and identify what the pay ranges are for these positions, and they made recommendations for changes. Now, the supervisor maintenance was on the paraprofessional pay scale, and they recommended a change. But again, the change would have, the change here would have placed that position, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember, supervisor maintenance, supervisor maintenance, they recommended to move from paraprofessional to auxiliary, but then this would have placed that position below other positions that report to it, so we haven't made that change yet. So this is the only change that we didn't make. It did stay on the paraprofessional, because again, you can't have somebody in a supervisory position where individuals are reporting to you that are at higher pay grades. So again, we didn't make that change because then it would have made too many more changes. And when TASB provides us with their salary study, they make the recommendations. For example, for teachers, they recommended the starting pay at $41,550. So we could be comparable to Eagle Pass and, was it Uvalde or San Angelo? Uvalde. Now, this right here, if you were watching the news and the state legislator, the governor did have his top list of what he was recommending, and it was $1,000 pay increase for teachers. So that immediately changed the market. Again, it's based on the market, and that's something that drove the market to this pay change right here. So it's a 1.8% general pay increase. So for teachers, starting pay at $41,550 for 632 of our employees is equivalent to $719,000. And this is just salaries. It does not include benefits as well. So again, everybody, all the other positions was at a 1.5% to midpoint increase. So in total for 1,451 employees, we have a total cost estimate of a salary increase or general pay increase with adjustments like a starting pay of $1,000 for teachers. It comes out to almost 1,339,000. So again, with no increase in revenue, we did not receive an increase in revenue from the state. So I can tell you that we placed a lot of effort in implementing this plan fully by just re-evaluating our budgets. So some budgets did get reduced. Again, everything is tied to what the priorities are, and we are a school or a learning center, and so I know our priorities are our teachers, and that we stay competitive in the market. So again, this $1,000 was driven by the market. And everything else, as I mentioned, came from what TASB identified as a market study and market placement for positions, and the max pay range for the position for any of our positions. What we have as a school district is the longevity pay. And let me show you, I think I have it here, or did I take it out, the teacher? I'll open up. Yes. Okay, let me show you the teacher one. Let me find it. And right here, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So on the teacher one, this is what it used to be. So starting pay was at $40,550. We went to $41,550. So that means a $1,000 increase plus an adjustment to change the scale so that each step is competitive. But as you can see here, the max salary last year was $61,080, and it is still $61,080. And for individuals that were on step 36 going to step 37, it was a $300 increase. And so that's the percent, or this creates that 0.47 percentage. So that's what we offered. The $300 was offered to all of the teachers, and then we use that percentage to apply it to all the employees that exceed the max in the market. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I don't want to bore you either. So do you have any questions? Do you want me to? And like I said, TASB, we are maintaining a plan with TASB so that they continue to review our salary schedules. So again, we're taking it to the board this September. They're also going to look at stipends this year. Last year, or I say last year, but the last 3 years we were really focused on our salaries. And now they're going to look on salaries and stipends. So again, we want to make sure that we're competitive, and we want to make sure that this is done by experts as well. Do you have any?